Okay, well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, or depending on whatever time it is where you're at. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Jake Smithwick. I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte, and I'm also joined by several other folks here as well. Derek Hillestad, Brian Stone, they're also our FM doctorate team, so be sure to engage with us today. And thanks everybody for being here. Be sure to use the chat box. Raymond, I see you. Thanks so much for being here today, and everybody else. And with that said, we'll dive into here. Here's our agenda. We'll go through some quick introductions, which I already did. We'll have our teaching moment, which is being focused on return to the office and some other related ideas behind that. We'll then jump into our virtual peer groups, or maybe we'll just all stay together, and then we'll have some time for office hours at the end here. A little about the Simplar Foundation. Our mission is to help bring research to practice and definitely engage with different folks on different types of research, especially focused on facilities research. We've done quite a bit of that, and we'll highlight some of our research in this area here today. And again, the goal is to increase collaboration between everybody to make things better here, more efficient. If you could please update your Zoom name, that way we can track attendance and just see who's on the call here today, so be sure to do that. So find yourself, click on more, and then click on rename. That would be much appreciated. So we're going to talk about return to the office. I will tell you that as I was preparing for today's discussion, I presented on this topic a few months ago, and how fast things have changed here with return to office, I think is really interesting. I'll highlight some of the latest research and some other things that are coming down the pipe with regards to this particular topic. So latest trends, developments, and other practices that we're seeing here today. So that is the agenda. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to kick off with a short poll. And let me get that opened up here. And I just want to ask everybody, it's a one question poll here. So I'm going to launch this poll. And if you could take a minute here and ask yourself, have you currently returned to the office or not? So I'm going to leave this open here for a minute. So everybody's still remote, anywhere between 1% and 99%, or everybody has returned to the office here. So take a minute. If you could answer our poll, this would be fantastic. Just give it a few more moments here. Okay. I think that's our poll, and here are the results of this particular poll. So let me pop this up on the screen, and you should be able to see this here, right? So the results here, it's interesting. We have a couple of folks that everybody's basically returned, nobody's returned to in-person work. So about 10% of us, about 3/4 of us have some sort of remote type or hybrid working. And then there's a number of people that have returned everybody back to the office here. So IFMA has a new research project that's coming down the line that's going to be looking at this topic specifically as an FM. How have you brought people back to the office? What's been the experience of that? And it certainly will be interesting to watch this. So again, folks, thanks for your feedback on that survey here. And there's going to be more to come with that here. Okay, so let's go through. I want to first talk about some brief history with regards to work from home and how this has been around. This chart is put together by a researcher. This is put together since about 1965. The percentage of workers that work from home as a total of the population. I think this is U.S. based, but it's still pretty consistent everywhere. Obviously, it's gone up a little bit. We had obviously a huge spike because of COVID. And I think in many regards, and definitely jump in the chat box here if you have a different perspective here, but I think a lot of folks that as they look at this return to the office perspective is that this return from home, 61% at the height of COVID, has dropped down to about 27% now. I think a lot of folks are expecting that this will kind of be the standard going forward here, right? Feel free to jump in the chat box if you see that as well here as to whether this is going to maintain, but I think a lot of things have been reading that working from home, at least to some degree, will be a normal part of how we work into the future. So some different data. This is based on data from a Pew Research Center. This is just about a month old here, so this is pretty recent data. 35% of workers with jobs that can be done remotely are working from home all the time. So if you're in a type of position where you can do your job fully remote from home, then about 35% of the people that said that. Now it's interesting that obviously as FM, we can't, it's hard to maintain systems and actually be on site and walk around and see what's going on. So it's hard for us to work home, but a lot of people that do have teleworking jobs or could be teleworked are working from home, right? Now this is down from 43% in January and 55% in October, right? So there's definitely a downward trend, but appears to be flattening out in terms of what types of people work from home. 34% of those who currently working from home most of the time say they would actually like to work from home all the time, right? So what we find here is that there's I'd say a small majority of folks that do work this, they want to continue doing this in the future. And then finally, in the US, most US workers, 60%, do not have jobs that can be done from home, right? And so us as facility managers, most of us obviously can work from home, construction, other types of service type jobs or involves being directly in front of customers. There's a lot of jobs out there that cannot be done work from remote. Now, I see we got one comment here. Dean Stanberry, jump on in here. Let's hear it.
Yeah, if you go back to the other slide, where it says 61% do not have jobs that can be done from home. So I've seen some different, perspectives on that. So like the one that said maybe 24% are knowledge workers that could work from home. So where did that particular data come from? And what do we think is the actual percentage of people that can reasonably work from home?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dean. This is a study from the Pew Research Center. They surveyed, I think it was around 45,000 people over about a month and a half, 6 to 8 week period. And they looked at, asked them a series of questions, which is the next couple of slides we've been focused on here, but it's mostly, I think it's a variety of different households. I don't have all the details as to how they did that, but Dean, you do bring up a good point here about if you're a knowledge worker, are you on site, or is you remote? How does it actually work here? But that's what they did. About 45,000 people over a period of about 6 to 8 weeks, and this is some of those main results that they got as a result of that. Yeah.
Do we think that's something that the Bureau of Labor Statistics is tracking or will track?
If I were to make a guess about that, I would say it's definitely something of interest that will be tracked in more detail going forward, because frankly, as FM, I think that is something that has a direct impact on us, right? If we see that we have 100 people and now 40 of those people don't have a need for an office anymore, that impacts our facilities significantly, because now we don't have space, we don't need all the space. And so how we respond to that will be interesting going forward here. I have some data here in a little bit from IFMA members about their thoughts about future work and the impacts on space. I thought this was shocking. About 80% of the FMs we surveyed, this is about a year and a half ago, 80% of the people said that their physical office spaces, like their building footprints, are not going to change going forward. So the expectation is that most people are going to maintain and keep the space they have here. But if you look at some of the data about work from home, hybrid, different people not coming in all the time, to me, all this suggests here that there are potentially seismic changes coming to the need for and use of office space. So to answer your question, Dean, I think it's something that should be looked at, maybe as a temporary thing for the next few years, but we need more broad data, I think, about this to help us better understand, what's actually going on here. Great questions. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks.
So growing share of U.S. workers are working a hybrid schedule. On the left-hand side, this is January 2022. On the right-hand side, this is February 2023. So again, this data is pretty recent here. Before, or I should say at the height of COVID, about 43% of people were working from home all the time. That's obviously dropped down to 35%. And there's a number of people, about 40% or so, that are working some sort of a hybrid model. And there's a smaller group of folks that do not do that. Now, this actually represents our poll we did here just a minute ago, and you all have probably seen similar types of things as well. Now, the next question we want to thought about here, or we looked at, is what's the impact on productivity, work-life balance, benefits of this. And what this shows here is that for people that work from home part of the time, almost or some of the time, what percentage of those people say that this work arrangement helps with the following? So 71% of the people says that what this does here is helps to balance their work life and their personal life. So three-quarters of people really see a benefit to having this work life, or excuse me, this hybrid approach, because it allows them to do that significantly. On the bottom side here, 53% of the people said that they can't feel connected to coworkers by having a hybrid approach. So if you're expecting to meet with, Sally, and you're working in the office on Mondays and Sally's has Tuesdays office days here, that can certainly be a challenge from that perspective. Now, there have been some major announcements just in the last few months about different large corporations that have said everybody is coming back to the office, and that's the way it is. There's other people have said we're going to be working remote or a hybrid version for the next 10 years and everything in between, right? My guess, and a lot of the different studies I've looked at with this, is that the reason why people are requiring people to come into the office is because of this last bullet point here, is that ability to work together as a team, to find people that can provide the service that we need. It's really difficult in a remote work environment. I know that several of us, I see Mike's on the call here, Derek, a couple other folks, we work in education. And I know that from the educational perspective, from a student standpoint, having a fully virtual experience is a lot different from the in-person experience. Mike, did you want to comment on that briefly?
Yeah, I that point that they phrased it as how connected they feel to coworkers. We might interpret that as being more of a social thing, but it's actually much more. It is true, it is a social thing that does weigh on people, but it's from a business point of view, it's productivity, right? It's not being connected to your coworkers means you're not interacting with them on your jobs and doing projects with them and everything. Those of us that work at universities, we saw that clearly when in 2020, 2021, when most of us were using Zoom for our classes rather than having face-to-face classes. You just didn't get to know the students that well. The results weren't as good from the students because they weren't with you. They weren't, they were distracted doing other things. Work-life balance, the other end of that scale there, the upper left-hand corner, work-life balance is a kind of, you could see it as a euphemism for not getting as much work done, and so, and
Sure.
so, yeah, you don't see the results that I don't know that companies are that interested in people, having good social connections at work as they are with work, getting the team work done that they need to do and collaborating properly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, so some of these other key points here too, again, we talked about some of this here, but productivity, the three-quarters of people that they surveyed for this said that they feel like one downside to this is that they're not receiving, there is no impact on their ability to receive what were called important assignments. So some people feel that, if I'm not in the office, in front of the boss, then they're just not going to give me things to do. But at least I won't have that face time. Based on the survey results, people were not really that concerned about that. And that's what I mean here, right? I mean, Mike spoke some truth here about the reality of being there in person. We all kind of intuitively know about that. And yet the data here, I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure this out and the best way to deal with this. It'd be interesting as we continue going forward, as we look at this here, right? Another part of this study is most U.S. hybrid workers say their boss trusts them to get their work done at home. So 80% of the respondents here said that they feel that when they ask their opinions about their boss's perception to this, is that do you trust to get the work done? So 80% of people said, yes, my boss trusts me to get the work done when they're working from home. If they're a hybrid worker, meaning they work sometime in the office and sometime from home, that actually dropped down to 64%. So again, there's not a lot of commentary as to why that might be here, but again, different perspectives. Now, another thing I'll say about the study here too, this is people's opinions about what their boss said. This is this is not what the bosses think about the employees, working from home here, right? So this could be skewed because, well, this is just what I think they say, and may not be based on the reality that either here, right? Now, when we look at different countries, what this shows here is these are for college graduates, and how many days per week they work from home by country. These are only, again, for college graduates. So that the reason why that's relevant to the study is because this might relate to the type of job that people have here. But you can see here that based on this particular study, Canada leads the work from home group about just shy of 3 days a week. Singapore's at 3 days a week, and on the lower end, this could be sampling errors, but Serbia, Austria, France, Greece, kind of on the lower end in terms of number of days work from home. The US is at about 2 days a week, kind of in the middle of the pack here, right? So globally, there's definitely lots of trends here, and that'll likely continue changing in the future here. What this shows is what are the working arrangements for different types of job functions. So fully on-site people, 60%, these are the frontline employees, mostly non-college graduates, typically have a lower pay scale. Orange are these professionals, mostly college graduates, typically higher paid. And then those that fully work from home, about 12%, are in specialized specific roles like IT, payroll. Many times these are contractors or consultants to an organization, and that's typically what group works from home from that standpoint, right? Now, when you look at different sectors, it really varies by sector. Again, Dean had talked about this earlier. If you are in the information sector or a knowledge worker, the percentage of people, or the number of days per week that these people do work from home is substantially higher. So compared tech at almost 3 days per week, and then there's a huge drop off compared to tech, compared to like finance and insurance. And you go down the line here, you can see these different fields here in terms of the number of people that work from home. One that's on here is construction at 1.5 days per week. I think you need to take this with a huge grain of sand. And what I mean by that, if you are a laborer or mason or carpenter, there's no way you're working from home any days per week, right? Because you literally can't do your job as part of that. My suspicion, and based on what I know about working with other construction groups, is that that number is for like business development, managers, other non-direct cost type of people that are actually involved in the construction of a building here, right? And every industry is like that too. FM, if you have knowledge workers on the FM side that manage the data, they can probably work from home. If you are in charge of fixing mechanical systems, then obviously you have to be in person to do a lot of that here. So it's important to keep in mind, not just by sector, but the actual jobs within those sectors to see how that relates to their ability to work from home. This chart shows work from home. This information, by the way, is from Nick Bloom. He's popular on LinkedIn. You can check out his website, wfhmap.com. He has a lot of other really good resources. Tracking by region, by cities. This is just US focused here, about which cities had the highest number of people working from home. This is since the start of COVID, or I should say right before COVID. So, and then this is where everything shut down, dropped significantly. And then you can see it by different cities. Again, the reason why there's such differences like San Francisco versus Boston compared to Louisville or Memphis or different locations like that is by the job sectors in those locations. If you're in IT sector, like in San Francisco, maybe Boston, finance, those obviously can be done a lot more from work from home, right? Next up here, again, startup rates. This is an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought about before I started preparing for today's presentation, is that they're seeing increased rates of startups. Now, this is not to say the success of such startups here, but if your startup costs are, well, I'm going to turn on my laptop today and sit from my dining room table and start a new business, that's a lot easier to do because you don't have overhead costs, there's not office cost, you don't have to drive, you can just do it, right? And I know people that during COVID, they have started their own businesses fully remote, and it's been widely successful, right? But it didn't require to actually pick up all this office space. So again, there's an expectation that this trend will continue. The churn rate, my guess would be also much higher. Churn rate meaning the number of new starts and number of failures will continue to increase. I still think there'll be a lot of failures because there always are for the startup industry, but the cost to entry is lower, which means competition goes up, which means people can have a more difficult time with that. So a couple more slides about this. Looking at office rents, this is something that certainly directly affects FM. This is by different regions, by different sectors. So again, Charlotte, Raleigh, North Carolina, there are slight increases in office rents, but again, by major metropolitan areas, San Francisco, Manhattan, Philadelphia, significant drops in office rents. right? In terms of that money that's coming from that. IFMA is on taking new studies related to that. Space planning and some other new research projects are coming out to better understand this further here. But again, the data suggests that the interest in having fixed office space on a regular basis for an organization appears to be decreasing here, right? The reason what's driving this here is that where there's long commute times, people don't want to go to the office, which makes sense. FM, we did a study right before COVID. Because of COVID, the average travel time for most FMs to get to their office, 8 hours a week. So an hour in, an hour back, plus some traffic. Before COVID, that's almost 11 hours a week. So because of COVID, again, this data is slightly old, but they're seeing a bit of a drop here in terms of commute times into the office here. Now, there's different sectors here, different data that we've looked at too with IFMA. Let me bring that up here about how COVID has affected the office buildings here. And this is what I mentioned earlier here. We asked, these are all facility professionals. We asked them, what's the change to your building footprint in the next 3 to 5 years? And here's what this shows here. 47% of the respondents said there's no change to the building footprint. I mean, when I saw this data, I was shocked, honestly. Now, this data was collected about a year and a half ago, and we're going to be updating this data going forward here. But at the time, and I think a lot of people still think this here, is that we're not expected as facility managers to be reducing the size of our buildings. And when talking to different folks about this, there's really 2 main reasons as to why people think that their building footprints are not going to change. The first one is that people are locked into leases and they can't. They would like to, but they can't. They're tied to a contract. They can't get out of it. The second reason is why people don't want to do this is because they're concerned about what's the future going to look like. If you have a bunch of office space and you decide to get rid of it, it's very difficult for us to reacquire that space. So I'd rather hold on to it and see what the future looks like, right? In some regards, that makes a lot of sense. That is absolutely a true statement here. However, if you think about what the cost impact is and what that impact is of having that overhead cost of having that space that you're not using, that's very difficult. And when you look at construction, many times it's things like that that have put company out of business here, right? So it's interesting to think about. We're tracking this. We have some new studies are coming out to look at this further here, but it's an important point to consider here. A couple more slides in terms of which days of the week are most commonly remote. You can see the chart here. So percent of companies that are required people to have in the office. So Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are most commonly where people are required to be in the office. Mondays and Fridays, substantially less. And that kind of makes sense here, right? So comments from Nick Bloom. He's the researcher that put together some of this data. Have people come in on the same day. So from an FM standpoint, in terms of preparing the spaces, mechanical systems, other requirements with that, this is something to think about. And there might be some efficiencies to gain by having people on site all at once versus, kind of splitting that up here. Promoting in-office days, lunches, trainings. I know several people I talked with about this. That's a huge benefit to encourage people to come back. And again, going back to if you're not going to be here, it's for exceptions because somebody's sick or something happens at home and it can potentially be there, right? So those are some of the main things that we've kind of seen in this space here. The last thing I wanted to highlight here about the other impact on other industries. This is golf, right? Golf has seen an increase of 52% since 2019. The percentage of people playing golf here, right? This is per trips per day. They looked at, they had GPS databases, and so they looked at how often people were at the golf sites, how long the golf course is, and you can see the data here. So it's interesting, and maybe to Mike's point earlier, this is almost consistently all days of the week, Monday through Friday, right? So if you're a boss worried about people not working and they're at the golf course, well, you have some data that would potentially suggest that as to what is actually going on with that. So main kind of lessons here, I do have some resources and white papers. If you would like a copy of this, be sure to reach out. We'll also get this on the website. So there's lots of studies out there. You can do Google searches as well. And it's pretty interesting to look at some of this here. So key takeaways, working from home or returning to the workplace, these are all changing rapidly. There's a lot of very heated discussions, I would say, about how's this. And as FM, we need to keep our focus on supporting the organization's mission. And whether it's you're going to keep bringing people back or some version thereof, our focus needs to make sure that people can be successful in our businesses. Working from home, including the hybrid, is here to stay. I mean, that is one clear thing that's not going to be changing, and we need to keep an eye out for that. The new research studies from IFMA, we have 2 that are coming out. Return to the office and the FM's experience with that, so be sure to take a look at that. And the space planning, in terms of space allocations, strategies for that, that project is ongoing, and we're kicking that off here shortly, so be sure to look out for emails for that as well. And finally, as FM, my suggestion would be to take an active role in planning for and enabling change. We just had a paper, a research paper published about this topic specifically, change management for unforeseen situations as FM. And so what we found here, the number one thing that we found to make change successful is having change agents. A change agent is somebody within your organization that can rally the troops. It's not a boss, it's not an executive, it's somebody at the peer level that can explain to each other why this new change we're doing is a positive benefit. So key takeaways for today here, and that kind of brings us to the end of our discussion here.